So this week there was a very influential character who had a lot to say. Puxatawny Phil, the groundhog. And, you know, all of us have the capacity to be influential, certainly if a groundhog does. And I like that this week we had Groundhog Day because, you know, the whole Puxatawny Phil and the groundhog, it's about, is he going to cast a shadow or is he bringing forth the light? Well, this year he brought forth the light. Spring's on the way, according to Phil. But it's a reminder that each of us are always a presence of influence. And our influence, we could say, is either casting a shadow or being a presence of light. And that's what we're going to talk about today as we resume our 4-week series based on the 4 elements of creation revealed in you. We had a snow break, and then I was out last week, so we've had a little bit of time. I want to go back and review just a bit, remembering the 4 primary elements of air and fire and water and earth. Would you give me the first slide, Alan? The first week we talked about air, how air represents the power of life, and what life is to our body, inspiration is to our soul. And then we talked about the power of fire. Fire brings both light and heat, and what light is to our being, illumination and transformation is to our spirit or to our soul. That we, as part of ourself as a creative being, we experience inspiration and we can be inspiring. We experience illumination and transformation, and we are agents of illumination and transformation. So today we reach water. Water has long been regarded as its property, its liquid movement, its energy in motion, emotion, the fluidity of it, and it's always been tied to love. That the presence, the elixir of life, if you will, is love. And the way this shows up in our life is influence. When we look at the word influence, the origins of the word influence tell us a lot. The meaning has changed over the years, but the origin of the word influence is flowing in of ethereal fluid from the stars to affect the actions of humans. That the ancients believed that influence was something that it was a supernatural, that the spirit moved like from the stars, moved upon us and acted upon us that we may be an influence in our world. Well, over time it has changed in that it's not anymore considered just a supernatural flowing in and moving upon us, but that we all carry out a calling of influence. That the question is not, are you influential? Because you all are. We are all a presence, and we have the capacity, whether we realize it or not, we are always influencing something, someone. And so it's not, are you influencing? It's how are you being a presence? How are you influencing? And so that's what we look at today. We back up a little bit and look at water. Water has always been considered sacred and holy. It's been a part of the creation stories. Whether you're reading the Bible or other sacred texts, water was used in baptisms, in christenings, in holy water. Today, many, many people still go to the Ganges River, to different places, to put themselves in water. The scriptures often talked about dipping in water or using water because the properties of water was seen as the elixir of life, and water would cleanse and purify. And so water, when we think about it, water and love have a lot in common. We ourselves are primarily made up of water. A newborn baby, it is said, is 80% approximately water. Depending on how old we become and maybe how sour we become, we are either 60 to 70% water by the time we die, usually. And the earth is 71% water. So all of us, the building block, the essential building block of life is water. How many of you remember a few years ago seeing Dr. Emoto and Messages of Water, where water crystals, they would speak words to water crystals or put labels on water crystals, and if they were positive words, the water crystals would take beautiful shapes. If if they were negative words, the water crystals would take shapes that looked quite ugly. So there's been a lot of correlation between our capacity to influence and water, that water is a medium that carries out that. The name of that book is The Message of Water, or Messages of Water, if anyone's interested in that. But consider this, like water, love is the essential building block of life. Like water, love can smooth out jagged edges. Like water, love moves easily around any object, always takes the path of least resistance, changes its form and how it shows up depending on the environment. Like water, love serves to cleanse and purify, to heal, restore, and sustain and nourish life. Like water, love is formless, yet it fills the form of anything upon which it is poured. Like water, love flows freely from the heavens. And like water, it reflects our essence, our true nature. We are the likeness and image of God. We are the likeness and image of love. This next slide, water is also considered the original mirror. You can stand over a body of still water and see your reflection. It says in Proverbs 27:19, as water reflects the face, so a man's heart or a woman's heart reflects the man or the woman. That just as water is the great reflector, that our life is reflecting what's going on inside of us. And so today we really consider our capacity to both be influenced and then to be a presence of influence, to be influential. You know, Ram Dass uses the term somebody training. The great Ram Dass says that from the moment we're born, we all begin our somebody training. That everybody and everything around us begins to tell us who we are. We're a somebody. But there comes a point in a time in our life when we have to step back and ask our own self that question, who am I really? Because we're really the culmination of all these outside influences, all these beliefs and these things that we've assimilated and inherited. We are bombarded with messages and things that influence us all day long, whether we realize it or not. How many of you can recall a very positive influence in your life that today still has inspired you to maybe go on and become something or do something? How many of you can recall an influence, like for example, someone said you can't sing or you should never play sports or please don't dance in public, anything like that? And we still feel that. I've told the story before. When I was a young kid, our church was having a big yard sale, and we gathered early in the morning at the church, and we're putting out all this stuff, and I was organizing some stuff on the table. And this woman, her name was Jackie. I've never forgotten her. She came over and she admired what I was doing, and she said, "You have a gift for organizing." And I stopped and I thought, I have a gift. Who knew? I have a gift for organizing. So what do you think I did that day? I organized everybody's stuff all day long. I was happy to be of service. I went home and I organized my room and all these things, and my mother loved it. And then when I stopped doing it, she reminded me, honey, you have a gift for organizing. Go clean your room. But I've never forgotten that. I can distinctly remember that feeling that washed over me because she influenced me. I can also remember some influences that weren't so positive and how they washed over me. And so each and every one of us have been influenced in the past. And while we can't go back and change those influences, what we can do is reframe what we allow them to mean to us today. And we can certainly seek out positive influences for our life and begin to think about, how much time do I spend consciously giving thought to what is influencing me? You know, do we put ourselves in nature? Do we intentionally listen to things that are positive and uplifting, that call out the best in us? Do we listen to music and that takes us to places that feel otherworldly? How often do we allow ourselves like a sponge to be influenced by something that is inspiring? And how often do we sort of just go through our day and collect whatever, like a sponge, whatever gets thrown our way, and we don't really think about what has influenced us, all the conversations, the things that we've heard. Well, part of our creative ability is to realize that the power of love is calling us to be an influence for love. In the scriptures, it often says that Jesus was moved with compassion. If you read about the many acts of healing, they're often preceded by, and he was moved by compassion. You see, he was influenced by compassion. That compassion, that presence and power of love, that holy, whole spirit of love began to rise up in him, I believe, and flow through him. And that was the healing elixir that flowed out to the other person. The same with other great spiritual teachers. They were moved with compassion. They were moved with something that allowed them to be a powerful influence. And so we ask ourselves, what can I do to allow more positive influence into my life and to bring recognition to the ways that I am being influenced? There's a story from the administration of President Calvin Coolidge. An overnight guest and an admirer of the president was staying at the White House. The next morning was having breakfast with the president. And so President Coolidge, after he received his coffee, he poured a little bit into the saucer and added a little bit of milk and a little sugar. Well, the admirer, not wanting to breach any rules of etiquette, he was influenced by what the president did, so he poured a little bit of his coffee into the saucer, a little bit of milk and a little bit of sugar. But he was mortified when the president reached down and put it on the floor for the cat. The reporter never wrote what the admirer did after that. But, you know, we're influenced in big ways and in simple ways. I heard a story this week of a little girl who had been shopping with her mother all day long, and it was into the evening. Finally, in the last store, as they're checking out, the cashier gives the little girl a lollipop. And the mom says, "Honey, what are you supposed to say?" And the little girl looks puzzled, and she said, "You know, what do you hear Mommy say?" And the little girl looked at the cashier and said, "Charge it, please." We recognize that in children. We know, if you have children, you know they've told stuff you did not want that child to say at the most inappropriate time. Because they're influenced, and so it is with us. It doesn't stop just because we get older. But as we begin to mature, we have the capacity to realize what is influencing me and what do I want to influence me. There's a story that's found in the Old Testament that you rarely hear referenced. It comes from 2 Chronicles 34. It's about a little boy named Josiah. It says, "Josiah was 8 years old when he became the king. He ruled 31 years in Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He lived as his ancestor David had lived. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. He was steadfast in doing what was right." Now, what makes this story fascinating, first of all, in history, that an 8-year-old, he's one of the youngest ever to become a king. But if you read the story, his father, King Amon, was very evil. He was hated by the people, so much so that the people of his own household assassinated him. They killed him. Well, this little boy's grandfather had also been very evil, so the people that had influenced him had not been very positive. But there was something in this little boy at 8 years old who was crowned as king, knew that he had a responsibility. He truly had a calling of influence. And what the scripture says he did is he found out, or he knew that in his lineage, King David was a part of his lineage. And he said, he was loved, he was great, he was known as a man after God's own heart. That's who I want to be like. And he let David influence him, the good works that he did and the good that he knew of him. And it says until he became 12 years old and older, and then he grew up and was old enough then to put his eyes directly on God and allowed God, the source of his being, to be an influence. And I love that little scripture because, again, it reminds us that it really doesn't matter where you came from. I know there are a lot of people that come from places and situations where there may not have been a lot of positive influence. But the truth of the matter is, you can use all of that to determine, I don't ever want to be that kind of influence. I don't ever want to repeat that. What he did is he broke a pattern. And it tells us that what he did, it said that He didn't follow the example of his father or his grandfather. He didn't choose to follow the traditions of the culture. He didn't worry about the approval of others. He didn't focus on being popular. He didn't follow the crowd, and he did not get sidetracked. What he did was he chose to be an influence of love, and he broke a pattern of ill-doing, of evilness, and we all have the capacity to do that. The co-founder of Unity, Myrtle Fillmore, broke a pattern. She was influenced by the women, the people in her family. She believed that she was sickly. She had tuberculosis, believed she was going to die. That had influenced her all her life until she heard someone say, "You're a child of God, you don't inherit sickness." And she began to take a hold of that idea. She allowed that idea to influence her. And she began to work with that idea until over a period of about 18 months, she was completely healed. And so each of us can do the same thing. But so often we get sidetracked, that the distractions of our life actually become more of an influence than the things that we intentionally want to influence us. There's a great story about Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra was a great baseball player. He was a catcher. He actually died this past September, but he was a well-known. And in 1957, he was in the World Series. He was the catcher, and he was known for talking to the batters when they came up and trying to distract the batter. That was part of what he was known for. And so in the 1957 World Series, here Yogi Berra is as the catcher, and the great Hank Aaron steps up to bat. And Yogi Berra says, "Hey, Henry, you're holding that bat wrong. You're supposed to hold it so the letters are up. You're supposed to be able to read the trademark." And as the reporter said, the pitch comes, Hank Aaron hits it, knocks it out of the ballpark all the way into the left bleachers, runs a home run, comes around and says, "I didn't come here to read." And I love that story because he didn't come here to read. He came here to play ball. He came here to keep his eye on the ball and to knock it out of the ballpark. The encouragement this week, when we think about water and love and your capacity to be influenced, is to take time to ask yourself, what did I come here to do? What do I have my eyes on? What do I do every day to marinate myself in a positive atmosphere, a positive influence? And to ask yourself at the end of the day, where did I show up as a positive influence, and where did I show up as something else? And do not berate yourself, but just check and restart, and the next week try again. Would you set up the PowerPoint, the video? I want to show you a short clip about the incredible power of influence. This is a young girl. Her name is Natalie Gilbert. She's 13 years old. Natalie was an aspiring singer, and she won a competition, and as the result of winning, she had the opportunity to sing the national anthem at the NBA playoffs in 2003. She's at the Rose Garden standing before over 20,000 people. She had the flu that day, but she wanted to go forward. And so she rehearsed the song in her room 5 times and did it perfectly. She walks out on that stage in front of 20,000 people, and here's a video.
And now to honor America and salute the men and women serving our country with our national anthem, please welcome, as voted by you, the fans, our winner of the Toyota Get the Feeling of a Star promotion, Natalie Gilbert.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the stars like stars? Stars like last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. Oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare and
standing there, and she laughs that nervous laughter at first and then looks back. She's in total panic. The man that comes over to help her, who obviously his gift is not singing, his name is Coach Maurice Cheeks. He was the coach for the Portland Trail Blazers who were playing that night. He was totally focused on what he needed to be focused on. But in that moment, he was moved with compassion. He was so moved with compassion that he put himself out there by going up and trying to tell her the lyrics and then eventually just trying to help sing along. And together they stood there, but the people that were there, would you give me that song, Richard, said that the crowd stood, and it was the loudest crowd singing of the national anthem ever. That people joined in and sang. Well, at the end of that, she wanted to move to another country. You ever felt that way? I remember getting embarrassed in elementary school one time and coming home and telling my mom I had to change schools. I was just so, sometimes you feel so embarrassed you don't think you can ever face your life again. But her mom said, honey, you have a choice. You can always be known as the little girl who botched the national anthem, or you can be known as a girl who influenced others through her mistake and who never gave up. Well, she chose to never give up. She's talked about it. She and Maurice have stayed in contact, and she now is out in Hollywood, California, and has moved on with her career. But you see, each of us truly carry out this calling of influence. Our goal is to be moved with compassion and to realize that we have the capacity to make a difference. In closing, I want to share another true story with you that is written by Barbara Glantz. It's titled The Simple Truth of Service. Barbara writes, she's a consultant. A few years ago, I was hired by a large supermarket chain to lead a customer service program to help build customer loyalty in this grocery store chain. During my speech, I said to all of the employees, every one of you can make a difference. Every one of you can influence people. Every one of you can make positive memories. Think about something special you can do for your customers, a memory that will make them remember their experience. Well, about a month later, after I'd spoken, I received a call from a 19-year-old bagger named Johnny. Johnny proudly informed me that he was an individual with Down syndrome, but he wanted to tell me his story. Johnny said, when you came to our store that day, I liked what you said, but I didn't think I could do anything for our customers because I'm just a bagger. But I kept thinking about it, and I thought, what if every day I could give a person my thought of the day? And so he began to look to find a thought for the day, and he said, if I couldn't find one, I'd just think one up. I got my dad to help me, and we printed out a bunch, and every night I'd cut them in little slips of paper. I took them to work the next day. And after I finished bagging someone's groceries, I'd give them my thought for the day and say, thank you for shopping with us. Barbara said, it touched me that a young man with Down syndrome would realize the power of influence that he had. But it didn't stop there. A month later, the store manager called me. You won't believe what happened, he said. When I was making my rounds today, I found Johnny's checkout line was 3 times longer than anybody else's. It went all the way to the frozen food aisle. So I quickly announced, we need more cashiers, get more lanes open. I personally tried to get people to move, and they said, no, we want to be in Johnny's lane. We want his thought for the day. The store manager continued, it was a joy to watch Johnny delight the customers. I got a lump in my throat when one woman said, I used to stop by once a week. Now I find excuses to stop by just to get Johnny's thought for the day. Well, it didn't stop there. A month later, the store manager called me again. Well, I want you to know, 19-year-old Johnny has personally transformed our whole store. Now when the floral department has a broken flower or an unused corsage, they look for a way to put it to use. They find someone in the store and they give it to them. Everyone is realizing they are a presence of influence. Everyone is having a lot of fun creating memories and learning what it means to put their signature on their work. Our customers are talking about us, and they're coming back, and they're bringing their friends. A wonderful spirit of love in action has spread throughout our store, all because Johnny chose to make a difference. Johnny's idea wasn't nearly as innovative as it was lovingly authentic. It came from his heart. It was real. That's what's touched his customers, his peers, and all who hear this story today. I love that story and the previous video because they remind us to take time to remember something that we take for granted, and that each and every one of us is a presence of influence. And let us be moved by compassion. Invite that spirit of compassion to flow in and through us, that wherever we put our signature, we've made a positive difference in our world. We're going to go into a time of meditative prayer, and I invite you to join me in this song as we share that time together. Use me, oh God. Use me, oh God, I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Lift your voice and sing it with me.